Leader of Opposition Business, Senator Henry.
Thank you, Madam President, and I dare say good morning to fellow senators. And permit me to add my voice to the congratulatory remarks that were made with regards to those who went to Taiwan and participate and showcase such brilliance of our St. Lucian people. And of course, anytime our people are out there as St. Lucians to perform and demonstrate our skill and talent, I think it should be applauded by everyone. Whereas I wasn't aware in detail of the outgoing, however, the snippets of what I saw in terms of the parading of St. Lucians in Taiwan, I was extremely proud seeing that St. Lucians are out there, you know, celebrating with a fellow country of ours. So congratulations and to all those who participated. I think these things makes us even better and stronger as a people. Madam President, with regards to the motion that is before the sitting of this Parliament, I wish to support the motion. And as I briefly state why, Madam President, permit me to just highlight that only Tuesday past, that the lower house debated such a resolution, and unexpectedly, and to the surprise of the opposition, that this motion generated much debate, and of course, which was just after a 3-minute presentation by the leader of the opposition in support of the motion of the Barretts. And I asked myself, Madam President, I stayed there and I listened to the presentation made by the Prime Minister and all those, and there were some very important salient points made. And in keeping, Madam President, with this whole month of Creole, I will, from time to time, use my Creole in making just this brief presentation that would not take me more than 10 or 15 minutes. So I want to spare concern that I'm not here for long. Madam President, the emphasis was on VAT, the discussion in the Parliament, VAT. And I asked myself, following the debate, why the mere resolution of the ordinary or the usual allowance for persons to receive the barrels, why was there such a debate on VAT, as it were? And I had to conclude, listening to the members from the government side, that VAT was once used as a vehicle to get to political power. In fact, there was a lot of discussion about VAT in the last election. And again, as we approach a period of election, VAT again, the engine was being ignited. However, the presentation from the member for Mikud North, Beaufort North, the Honorable Musa Jabatis, in highlighting the historical context of VAT, actually flattened the tires of that vehicle, because he indicated that VAT really started by the UWP administration. The institutional arrangement for VAT was established by the UWP administration, and that the St. Lucia Labour Party government inherited a VAT office already established, cabinet conclusions establishing the amount of 15% for VAT, and therefore being responsible and accountable, move on with the implementation of VAT. But why VAT? Again, there was some other pronouncement made by the Prime Minister that they would be returning to this House. Subsequently, it was made mention to also remove VAT, not just on the barrels, as it were, but also on burial. Found that very interesting, that the government would be returning to remove VAT on burial. But, Madam President, I recall vividly that the government indicated, following when they took office, and referencing the presentation by the Caribbean Development Bank, which indicated that the Labour Party had not implemented VAT efficiently because there was some basic food items are without VAT. And therefore, the Prime Minister suggested that we should put VAT on basic food items and then target people specifically so that the wealthy people do not benefit from those basic food items. So I asked, why isn't he taking the same approach to burial? Is it that every person needs to receive VAT removed from burial? As far as I'm aware, Madam President, burial costs range from $5,000 to the $30,000 to $40,000+ in terms of the cost of burial of a loved one in St. Lucia. And I'm asking, is it because we are now approaching the silly season that those statements were being made? Or is there really a genuine concern about poor people? Why position yourself to add VAT to basic food items like chicken backs, flour, sugar, and issue poor people, as he indicated in the lower house, a card, poor people a card so that they would receive those benefits, but then decide that you're going to remove VAT on burial? So I ask, why be so concerned about the dead and not the living? That was the pronouncement made by the Prime Minister in the lower house on Tuesday. And in fact, he almost broke in tears to talk about the cost of burial. It was so outrageous and unfair that people need to bury their loved ones with VAT. But in the same breath, said that we need to put VAT on those items and issue for people an e-card. And he said that e-card they'll be able to identify themselves so that they could benefit. So I concluded that the Prime Minister probably preferred that we kill poor people with VAT and we bury them free of VAT, for want of a better word. I'm trying to carve it, but while people buy chicken backs, lentils, flour, sugar every day, and on that day, according to Martin Luther King Jr., when we have to be victimized by life's final common denominator, we call death. It is just one day in our life. On that day, we conclude. But every day we buy food. Every day we have to live. So I was a bit concerned as to where is this government heading with that. In the conclusion of his presentation, it was implied that VAT will be totally removed by the end of this administration term in office. I heard that. So VAT will be removed within by the end of that, on or before this administration removed from office. Again, I ask, why remove VAT when you are moving into election? Why keep VAT now? And then when you're about to move into election, you decide that you're going to remove VAT. But you made the promise before you entered into office. Isn't this just mere games? Est-ce pay? Well, I am afraid indeed. Because, but here are the facts made. The facts punctuated at the lower house, Madam President, was one, VAT institutional arrangement was by the UWP administration. Two, VAT was made 15% by the Cabinet of Ministers, and it was put into motion under the St. Lucia Labour Party. The other point that was made, Madam President, at the lower house, which is important for the discussion, is that the former Prime Minister and the member for Castries North did indicate and endorse the statement made, the historical statement made with regards to VAT. And that he said he stood by his position then and he stands by his position now as it relates to VAT. Seemed like a position not welcome, but I was pleased to have heard this. But more importantly, Madam President, it was asked, what has VAT done? Because now we consider removing VAT. And like I said, Madam President, I was surprised that the government side led the discussion along those lines in terms of what has VAT done to us. And I was told that it grew the economy. And
Senator Henry.
Yes, Madam President.
The substance of the debate at hand is that of VAT on educational supplies, services, and barrels entering St. Lucia. I have no problem with reference to what was said in the House below, but it should not be the substance of your discussion. So please move along.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I intend to. I was just setting up the background for what I was about to say, Madam President, because certainly I'm guided by some of what was said in the lower house. So yes, Madam President, as it relates to the barrel issue and the removal of VAT, and of course the motion that is before us, and as it's written in the form of the resolution, it is captured that the minister responsible for finance seeks the approval of a draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 1 and 3. And in the case of Schedule 1, it is to include a definition for the words educational supplies, so that printing, there isn't a double taxation or VAT being applied on items coming in that is being reproduced. And more importantly, on the B, in the case of Schedule 3, is to exempt on the importation of personal items, food and clothing. Madam President, I've made the point with regards to the Prime Minister in addressing the House on this motion indicated that he's coming back for removing VAT on burial, and we've made the point with regards to that he intends to put VAT on basic food items. But I want to move on, Madam President, to the issue of the barrels. Madam President, since the inception in this Parliament, I've listened, and I'm aware that for the short time that I've spent here, the barrels initiative has been approved by all parliamentarians, even if it was an initiative conceptualized and conceived in the philosophy of the St. Lucia Labour Party. Yes. And this year, Madam President, even more important, I think I'm asking that those persons in the diaspora dig deep into their pockets and into their pantries and to help give to St. Lucians at this point in time. But just to pause, Madam President, at this time, that both members from Denry North, Mikud South and Mikud North, the Prime Minister, highlighted the value of the diaspora as it relates to their relationship, not just on barrel, but to their givings to St. Lucians and to their constituents. And I think that was important, Madam President, because I am aware that the Prime Minister had a number of visits around the diaspora, and for what I've gleaned to listen, I did not hear any encouragement, I may be incorrect, as it relates to persons in the diaspora given. As a matter of fact, persons were made to believe that things are all good in St. Lucia. But we move on. So our families in the diaspora, we are asking them to dig deep at this point in time into their pockets, their pantries, their kitchen cupboards, and to give. As I conclude, Madam President, I want to focus on the aspect of giving. At this point in time, it's all, as we move into the Christmas season, it's all about giving. And I dare say that some politicians, Madam President, will also be doing a lot of giving at this time. But I would like to remind us to be fair and reasonable, and first give to those who are in need. And if there's anything left over, we can consider giving to our followers, our friends, family, and foreigners, in that order. Madam President, I would like to speak on those who are less fortunate, who probably would not receive or not able to get a barrel, and encourage those persons in the communities who are barrel recipients that if you have already received the barrel and your neighbor or your parliamentarian is distributing food hampers, please ask your parliamentarian rep to pass on the hamper to a needy neighbor instead. Don't accept and deprive another family from enjoying Christmas. But to those who are packing up those barrels, there are some things, Madam President, I would like to see in the barrels. And there are some things that should be omitted from those barrels. Madam President, sugar and salt are not needed. They are not good for our health, especially given that our challenges with no hospitals and some of them are incomplete. Madam President, I would like for those who are packing the barrels to include some painkillers and off-the-shelf medicine. That will also help. Madam President, preserved meats and canned tuna fish would be welcome. Send them, of course, because the fisheries complex, as we knew it before, is no longer. And the National Abattoir is earmarked to be demolished. Madam President, I would like for those who are packing the barrels to include some pampers for children and adults, as the NICE program would be happy to receive some, and our poor children would like to have some pampers. Madam President, in the barrels, if you include toys, let them be educational. I would advise that you do not put games that would encourage gambling and violence, because we have too much of that already to deal with in St. Lucia. Madam President, I would ask for those who are packing the barrels to include a single burner stove that can use kerosene, because fuel has gone up by almost 100%. Madam President, ask them to send laptops in the barrel if they can use or new, for the government has cancelled the laptop programs. Madam President, and more importantly, the government, while they have cancelled the laptop programs, if recognizing that CXC is planning to bring the CXC exempt through online means, so laptops would be welcomed in the barrels. And just a little chemical, Madam President, if they can, they should put into the barrels, because, of course, Madam President, some schools have mold and we are closing schools faster than it is in the month of August. All in the barrel, Madam President.
On a point of elucidation, Madam President, I am hearing the fellow senator talking about putting...
Madam President, I will continue my presentation because I'm just near completing. It's on a point of elucidation, just 2 more minutes before I'm finished.
Senator, I would like to advise you, though, that if you stick to the subject, the debate on the hand, you would choose some of your words more carefully.
Thank you, Madam President.
And you would also not infringe some of the exemptions that exist in the act that you are discussing.
Thank you very much.
Not even the act, the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you very much, and I do hope that nobody put anything that is against
Senator Mangal.
Madam President, on a point of order, I think that the member is misleading this Honorable House by indicating that he would like them to put in some kerosene because the price of fuel is going up by 100% or has gone up by 100%. The price of fuel has not gone up by 100%, and I also need to ask, what is kerosene? Is kerosene not fuel? So tell us.
Senator Mangal, please always start with what is your point of order.
Thank you, Madam President. My apologies, and I do withdraw if I asked to put kerosene in the barrel, not to put kerosene, but put a single stove that uses kerosene, if it's allowed. But, Madam President, I did not ask to put kerosene. I asked for a single burner stove that uses kerosene. But leave that alone, Madam President. I'm nearing my presentation. But, Madam President, more importantly, as our families in the diaspora prepare their barrels, I ask them to be watchful and be careful. Do not leave those barrels unattended. Let nobody put anything, because sometimes I hear that things we do not want comes into a barrel, like fire, weapons and what have you. So we have enough crime to deal with. Please be watchful with those barrels, that we do not have firearms coming in those barrels. And finally, Madam President, just important for us to show gratitude at all times. When those barrels come, it's always good to remember that the recipients of those barrels show gratitude to those who have made the sacrifice at this time to deliver them, and say thanks. So I wish every one of them would be receiving, but more importantly, continue to be a caring and sharing society. Thank you very much.